All right. So the next part that I want to look at for demo number 2 is also now looking at how to apply color to forms and the different methods, panels, and options that we can play with to do that inside of Illustrator. So I'm going to start off with a reference shape on screen. So go over to your shape tools, and we'll do this a couple ways, but start with a basic shape like a rectangle. And then let's also go ahead and draw with some other tools that we've played with, like the pen tool. Let's go ahead and add like a pen pathway line on screen. Just something small and simple. And let's also maybe do a little bit of the blob brush somewhere separate of everything. All right. If you turned on the gradient tool by accident. Did you turn it on from your toolbar?
Well, when we were doing the stroke thing, I was clicking options.
Yeah, you should be able to get off of it by going back to your arrow tool. Yeah. There you go. Okay, so we've got a few shapes up that we'll play with. You may notice in Illustrator that at certain screen zoom levels, your shapes may not look like they're fully there. Like if you look at my screen, it's not just the projector, it's that the line is missing. It looks like it's missing. But if I zoom in, it's there. It's just based on screen refresh rates and resolutions that it can show those lines at different levels. So don't be worried, just zoom around until you find a happy medium. But let's go ahead and play around with changing colors and looking at panels for doing that. So first off, the basics we know about applying color attributes to a form is working with what two attributes. What are the basics for giving a vector some sort of color application? What are they? Anybody?
Sorry, what?
Sorry. Okay, so what two attributes define color for a vector in Illustrator?
Fill and outline?
Fill and stroke. Yeah, which is the outline. So you're on it. Just make sure you get the term right, because that's what it'll be listed as. But yeah, fill and stroke. And if you look, the one we've been playing with the most is up here on top of our tool option bar. So with an object that you've already drawn and you've reselected with your black arrow, you get the options up here that look like this. And we can change these first two boxes to switch out our fill color first or our stroke color, which is that outline that goes around the form. So we know we can apply color quickly that way. If you can't see the stroke line around your box, go ahead and change the stroke width or weight up at the top where it says 1 point and thicken it up a bit so you can actually see the color up here. And so I just have my rectangle selected and I switch the thickness number up there at the top so I can see that color really well. I'll make it extra contrasty for you guys. All right, so we can apply color in those two basic ways. Now, when we work with other forms, we can do the same thing, like with our pen line. If we go to our pen stroke, right, pathway, if we select that, we can also change it. But notice that you don't get anything if you change your fill color for that object, except when you do this. This is what happens when you add a fill to an open pen pathway. You see what happens is that depending on the way that you drew the line, it applies the fill kind of in a linear fashion across the shape. So if your line work does a crazy 8 like mine did, it's going to make a crazy 8 fill across it. It's also called the checkered effect, is what you get with that. And that happens a lot. But this is what stroke looks like when it's applied to a pen tool that's just open path. But again, in general, people use the pen path or an open path to apply just stroke color changes. across the path line. So again, you can kind of highlight the stroke and not necessarily the fill color for it. Same thing applies with the blob brush down below. We know we can change colors the same way. Now, if you look below your toolbar at the very bottom, you have two giant squares down there that represent the same color options for you. Now, this one differs than the one up at the top. The one at the top up here only lets you access the generic default color swatch. If you go down below and use these boxes down here below your toolbar, you can double click on one of them to access the custom color picker. And you should get a pop-up that says color picker, and it looks like this. And it gives you a few options and details about the color you're using. The first thing you get to change is this giant box, which represents values for a specific tone that you're working with, or even the saturation of a specific color. And then this long rainbow strip, which represents your hues that you can use. So you can drag the hue slider with the little arrows on either side by going up and down. And then inside the select color box, you can just click and drag or click and point this little circle to reference color from that point inside the value saturation box. So again, what you get are custom colors on this screen. So this is really helpful if you don't like what the swatch is giving you, right? Like the swatch is great if you're just playing around, but it really doesn't give you exactly what you'll need probably. So let me tell you else what's going on in this screen. A couple things they give you details about. Number one, when you switch color, when you're switching colors of an item in here, it shows your two colors represented by this split tone box. So what you see on my screen is a purple box on top and an orange box below it. So it's just showing you your orange is what you were just working with for this current shape you have selected, and the purple is what's going to replace it. So as to give you a visual reference. You also have some other boxes on here. Like you have these two little boxes that show up next to it sometimes. On my screen, I've got one that says out of gamut warning, and then I have one that says out of web color warning. Let me give you a little rundown of why these appear, what the differences are. So gamut is based on a specific color space inside of your design. So depending on the color space your document is set to, which if I look up here on mine at the top of my Illustrator doc, it says RGB. That's the color gamut limit that I have. So there's only so many colors available inside of RGB. So the moment I select one of these, which gives me like millions of billions of color options, if it's not one that works, it'll show this little pop-up warning sign over your color gamut. That's important if you're printing, okay? If you see that warning, you might want to click on it, and it will automatically adjust your tone to correct it for a useful color that can be used, or a neighboring color that can be used that is in gamut with your print space. Okay. There was another color that appeared there, another box right below it, the print space for web or web display. So websites only have a standard range of colors that can be represented on all monitors. So you can click the little cube that it shows you above that to correct your color to represent a web-specific color. There's also a checkbox for web colors below your main value, your giant value selection box that says only web. And it will adjust the depiction of your value scale to where you can only select colors that work from the web for that specific hue that you're playing with. And they're much more limited. Way more limited when you get to web colors. You also get some other numeric values in here that are helpful moving software to software. Like you get HSB colors, which is kind of a hue, saturation, and balance. And then you get RGB listed, which is red, green, and blue. That's monitor consistency. You also get this one that has the pound symbol or the hashtag, and that is for hexadecimal. That's basically a number and letter combination code, universally used. And then you have CMYK measured out in percentages of those colors combined to make the color you currently have. Yes?
I just noticed that mine on top is CMYK.
Yeah. If it says CMYK on your main dock and mine says RGB, that's okay for the demo file. It's not that big of a deal. It's just a different color mode. And it also, what it depicts is the color space you're working in for your document, which you can change at any time. And I'll talk about that later down the line when we get to the final stages of the project. Okay, so those numbers, by the way, are important in case you want to copy colors real easily. The hex is the easiest one to grab because it's all in one line. So you could copy that, move to a different object, come to the color picker and paste it in to write in the same color application. Real easy. But that's how you can change up color inside here by playing around with the tone value scale and the hue bar. And it will make the change when you hit OK. Other thing to notice about these giant squares at the bottom of your toolbar is you can switch between your fill color, which is the solid box, or you can click on the stroke line box to make that the color that you're currently working with. And you can manipulate the stroke color as well by double clicking on it. So you have options for doing manual adjustments down here by double clicking on them in kind of an easy fashion. Other places that you can make color changes will be in the panels over on your right. So if we go to panels on the right, there's some of the panels at the top, like the basic one is called color up here, and it's represented by kind of a nice little rainbow of hues and values based on different colors that you can just click on and change out whatever object you have selected and whatever attribute you have as the upper level attribute. So if you see on my screen, I have down here on my toolbar the stroke line on top of my fill, which means my stroke is active. So if my stroke is active, I can change over here and my stroke color changes only. But if I select my fill square down there and change up in the color panel, then my fill color changes only. So you have to kind of pay attention to that when you're playing around with color changes on the fly. Make sure you have the right thing active to get the change you want. But the color one, again, it's kind of a like free form, like you can kind of click around and get random colors as you want. Another neat one that's in here is called Color Guide. Go ahead and click on that panel on your screen. And Color Guide is actually pretty unique. But pretty interesting. So it gives you a few things here. Number one, you get this little recommended color swatch right here based on the current color that you have active. So my fill color is active. It's this weird purplish blue. And up here, the color guide gives you its recommendations of other colors that might work with that tone based on a specific construct or method of color theory. So to change that up, we can actually click the little pull down right here next to this. And check this out. It gives you a complete rundown of the sort of mechanical reproductions of complementary colors, triadic colors, compound colors, different versions of contrasting colors, all based on the main color you have active. So if you're ever running out of ideas for your color scheme or need like a recommendation for a contrasting tone to your main color, you can use these to figure that out or to kind of get suggestions. So with my blue, the high contrast tone to it or opposite is this funky green on the opposite side of the spectrum. And then I've got some in-betweens that are kind of brown, a little red, and a darker blue, and then a lighter blue. So I have lots of these kind of crazy options available. And they're all based on tints and shades. So if you look below that, then you have the ability to change out the shade values for those colors or the tints for them. So darkness and lightness of the tones, essentially. So you get a lot of options for manipulating and fine-tuning your color choices also through this, or at least getting recommendations. So that's playing with Color Guide. The last one that I'll show you is called Swatches, which we've seen, but we haven't gone into. So go down to the swatch panel down below that and turn on your swatches. And what you see inside swatches, again, we've kind of seen it up to this point. You get a basic collection of colors that they feel like, like, hey, this is just so you can play around inside of Illustrator and get a feel for coloring something in. Well, the neat thing here is that they actually have more swatches installed in Illustrator than are visible here. Tons of them. To get to those extra swatch libraries, we're going to go down to a little icon right here below the swatch panel in the lower corner that looks like some library books. And I'm going to click on it. And what it pops up is this lovely huge list of many different preset default swatches that are already installed with Illustrator. Now, if you want to turn any of them on, you just go to one of them and open it up by clicking on it. So I'm going to go to this one under Art History for Russian poster art. And what you get inside those swatch folders is a collection of colors that are based on whatever the swatch design was. So like with the Russian poster art one, I get like average color tones based on sort of Russian poster designs. So they have them in different levels, like 3-part contrasts or 4-part contrasts and those types of things. Sort of based on general colors that have been seen before. So it's kind of neat when you can find those real quickly. We'll actually utilize one of these Russian poster art palettes for our main design. So just so you know, that's where it is. You can go into your library for swatches, and then you can pick out any number of different types of visual tones in here. So there's quite a bit, a lot. They even have one in here called color books. Color books are actually standardized colors used in the print industry, called Pantone libraries, usually is the most famous. And they're set colors that are understood as a standard for printers around the world. So a lot of people use Pantone, or what's also understood as spot colors, accessed through places like this. Okay. Now those are your coloring panels. Now another neat feature that's plugged into Illustrator, if you've been working on a design for a little bit, and let's say you want to make a design that's a different color variation overall, like you want to apply a different palette to it. So let's say that this collection of weird lines represents my design. I'm going to go ahead and draw a big selection around all of them. And then I'm going to go up to my Edit menu option. And I'm going to go down to Edit Colors and Recolor Artwork. And you should get a pop-up window that looks like this. And this is really cool. This is great. Again, if you want to make like quick variations to a design, like you want to test out a different color theme, this is a great way to do it. So what it shows you here, first off, is it shows you every color that is associated with an object that you currently have selected in your design. So I selected all 3 of my objects, which have 1, 2, 3, 4 colors. And if I look over here, there's all 4 of them listed. And what's cool is that I can change out any one of them if I want to by changing the square or swatch underneath the new category column on the far right of my main color line. So I'll double click on the block under the orange one on mine, which is this top color. And it'll pop up the color picker. So I can make like a quick like freeform change. Let's say I want to make it this weird kind of red magenta color. I'll say OK. And it lists that color now inside the new color box. And I'm going to change out my yellow also. Make it a green, just change the hue in this case. I want to leave the value the same, but I'm going to change up the hue in this case. So I get the same contrast out of the line. And then the same with the blue line, I'll just switch up the hue as well. And for black, there's not technically a box listed because black is kind of considered like a all-encompassing color. So if you want to add a box to it to switch blacks out, you just double-click in the empty region, and it'll ask you if you want to add one, and you say yes. And then double-click on the black sample square and switch it out to something else. Now you may have to double click on it twice because sometimes the black one doesn't automatically set to a color if you don't double click on the swatch square for it a couple times. It may just stay in like a grayscale if you're not careful. But after we do all this, then we can actually look. If you look in your main screen, like this is on preview, so it shows you an active preview of what you're changing to. Yeah.
That's how you change the arrow color. I changed the arrow color.
Yeah, now you can do it through here. Yeah, you can change your arrow stroke colors here. Like that's kind of nice, right? Yeah, so this is a little bit more of a, like this will change everything regardless of how it's designed as long as it's made of vectors. So after you're done in here, if you like what you see on your main screen, after changing up the colors, you can say OK. And now you have a completely new variation of tone inside your design. Again, that tool is awesome for recoloring for the purposes of variation, is what I recommend it for. So if you copy your entire design to a second artboard, for instance, and then go in and do recolor artwork for the whole thing, you could, again, kind of have two variations of your design to play with to really kind of get a good feel for where does this color really need to go to enhance you know, focal point, contrast, all of those things. Okay. Let me see if there's anything else I want you to play with. Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I lost my page.
You lost your page. Okay. If it's not on screen, you can hit Command 0 to see if it'll recenter your screen. So hold down Command and then hit 0. There you go. Yeah, if you get off screen, like if you do this action and you're like, oh, I don't know where I am, just hit Command 0 and it will recenter your screen on the last active artboard you had. You can also just zoom out a bunch. If you zoom far enough out, you'll see this, which is your entire sort of Illustrator area. But let's get it back on screen here. Okay, so there is one more panel I do want to show you before we move on to the next step here, and it's called the Appearance panel. So go down to your panels and look for the one called Appearance. And Appearance, this is kind of a good panel to know about because it allows you to add effects or change or keep record of what your object is that you currently have selected, what's applied to it. So if I select my rectangle in my design, my appearance panel changes and shows me all of the different things I have set for that rectangle. So it tells me I have a stroke around that box that's this kind of weird lime green, and that it's an 11-point thickness stroke. I can also, there's down arrows for each of these options, so you can actually change up the opacity for the color appearance of that thing, so you can make it transparent. If you click on opacity, it'll open up a separate little menu, and you can change the opacity or transparency of that particular item. And you can also set up some other options down below. But just so you know that you can change transparency values from this panel if you want to for individual elements. So I also have a fill color listed here, so it tells me that I have this current fill applied to my design. And then down below, you have a main opacity controller that controls the overall opacity for the entire object that you have selected. So if you need to change that at any point to suit your design, this is where you can do it from quickly. There's a neat feature down below this panel that looks like an FX icon. So this is where you can actually add like special effects to your design. and apply them to specific design elements. So if I have my fill box selected inside the appearance panel, so I'm going to click on the word fill, and then I'm going to go down to the FX icon inside the appearance panel at the bottom, and I'm going to click on that, and it opens up this listing. It's a two category listing for effects. The first row of effects is for Illustrator, so these are all typically these are all vector effects. And then you have actual Photoshop filters that can be applied in here. Now I'll tell you at the front end, I really don't want you playing with the Photoshop filters for this assignment because they're all pixel based. And they are limited to resolution, so it shows up really fast in the design if you don't know what you're doing. So stick to the Illustrator section, and I want to show you some of these because they're kind of fun. First off, you have one in here where you can actually convert shapes or objects you've made into a mock 3D form. So if you see the one that says 3D up there, go ahead and go to that and go to Extrude and Bevel. And click on it and give it a second. And you get a pop-up panel that looks like this. And this is for you to control and actually sort of mimic a 3D shape out of your flat design work. So it doesn't show anything on your main artboard yet, but if you go down to the bottom of this little 3D pop-up window, there's a little preview checkbox that you can click on that will allow you to apply the 3D effect to the appearance for whatever you had selected in your appearance panel. So if you look in my screen here, you can actually see that it's made my rectangle kind of three-dimensional. And if I want to change its thickness value for that cube, now that it's made it look like a cube, I can go right here to where it says extrude depth. And it says 50 point. I'm going to change it to like 200. And now it looks like an actual like three-dimensional shape on screen. Now if I hit return, it closes the 3D panel and puts the effect on it. The good news is the effect is not permanent, okay? It's an appearance. So if I want to go back to it, I just go back to my appearance panel, go to my fill item in my box right there, and expand my fill item, like drop the arrow down for it. And listed underneath that object is my 3D extrude and bevel that I did. So I can click on 3D extrude from there, that little yellow text, and re-access the 3D options for my object. So I can do all kinds of stuff in here. I can rotate this little square up here, this little sort of 3D square it shows you. So if you want to actually change the position of your object, again to sort of show a little mock 3D perspective and representation, you can do that. It's pretty cool. A lot of people use this tool with text, by the way. Sometimes they use it with simple object forms, but they often use it a lot with text. So if you ever need like 3D looking text, this is the tool you want to use to make it look that way inside your design. Okay, so that's the 3D tool. I'm just going to cancel out of it for now. And if you don't like the effect that's listed inside the appearance panel, if you want to get rid of it, just select the effect by highlighting it by clicking on the FX icon and hitting delete. Well, not hitting delete, my bad. You should be able to drag the effect down into the trash can. If you hit delete, it deletes the whole fill for the object or the whole object. But there are many different special effects that you can play with. If you go back under that FX icon, that you can apply to your shape that you have selected. So there's a lot of fun ones, things like zigzags, offset paths, stylizing filters like adding drop shadows or adding the scribble effect. Scribble's kind of fun because it actually makes your box look like it's filled in with scribble lines. If there's one here that says childlike, so you can actually make it look like it's got childlike fill-in colors. Kind of cool. Kind of fun to play with sometimes. Sometimes saves you from the hard work of trying to make your own scribble. It just applies it straight to your path as is. Okay, so that's appearance, and that's really the last panel that I want to cover in terms of dealing with working with color and manipulating just the general appearance of pathways and vectors that you design inside the system. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the video, and then I'm going to start a new one after this one to move on to the next part.